Thanks for having me back. I was here about a year ago. I'm the founder and program director of the Brighter Brains Institute. It's a nonprofit. We're headquartered in Piedmont in Alameda County. We've been operating for 4.5 years, and our primary goal is promoting humanism in sub-Saharan Africa. And we're operating mainly right now in Uganda, Ghana, and Nigeria, and a little bit in a couple of other countries, Kenya, Tanzania, and Malawi. So we've been working at this for 4.5 years. We've had all kinds of ups and downs and failures and successes and various things like that. I'm going to focus tonight on just one of our projects. We probably have, I'm going to say, between 15 and 20 projects, and this is just one of our projects that I'll be talking about. And the project is in Kanungu, which is in southeastern Uganda, which is an interesting region. It's near Rwanda and near the Congo, and it's a fascinating part of the world. I'm going to start off by asking, how many people here are ex-Catholics? Good. Yes, me too. So what Kanungu is famous for is there's this phenomenon called the Marian Apparitions, which are Catholic, often children, Catholic people that say they see, that say they have a visitation from the Blessed Virgin Mary, from Mary, the Mother of God. And so there's all kinds of, and some of the famous ones are Fatima and Lourdes, and we've probably all heard of those, right? Where these people see the Mary, the mother of Jesus, and she tells them certain things, etc., etc., etc. What is not as well known is that there's an enormous amount of Marian apparitions in Africa, and that in these regions there can be horrible consequences. And the most horrible consequence took place in Kanungu, which had an atrocity which is equal to or greater than the Jonestown Massacre. We're all familiar with that, right? The Jonestown Massacre in Guyana, where about 900 people drank Kool-Aid and died. And but Kanungu topped that by about 100 people. So I'll just start in, and I'm going to show you, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you about 50 pictures and talk about Kanungu. It'll take about a half an hour, and after that you can ask me questions for another half hour or 45 minutes. I just want to make sure I've got this right. Let's see. Okay, so this is talking about Marian apparitions. There's a huge amount of Marian apparitions. They happen in Australia a lot, and this is a list of various Marian apparitions all over the world. How they happen, I have no idea. We're all humanists here. We don't believe in Marian apparitions, but it is this. Oh, here another famous one is Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico. That's a famous one in our hemisphere. Okay, but in Africa, like I said, they can have horrible consequences. Okay, so what happened, the Marian apparition in Kanungu started with this woman named Credonia Murwinde, and it's on this website. She's listed as the world's worst female serial killer. She's a very interesting personality. She's accused of killing 4 people before she became a holy woman. She killed like 2 boyfriends and took their money, and then poisoned both of her brothers and took over all the family property. And she was a very charismatic woman. And so what happened is Catholicism moved into Africa, and it sort of overlapped with a lot of traditional African religions. And where she grew up in Kanungu, there is a place where the local African god often talked to people. So she said that she would go to this place and the Blessed Virgin Mary would talk to her there. So Credonia started saying that she was having apparitions from the Blessed Virgin Mary at this one particular place, which was already revered as a holy place by her people, by the people of Kanungu. So then after that, she's a woman which is lower status in this particular tribe, the BiZoHa tribe, than men. So she had to ally herself with men. So she allied herself with 2 priests. They're on the I guess that's on the left. She allied herself with those, and I think this other person is her sister. She didn't kill her sister. Her sister survived. But and so she had this like group of people, and they started this whole movement for the restoration of the 10 Commandments, which what she said was that Mary, the Mother of God, told her that people had to start obeying the Ten Commandments. This is like a very simple thing, but people had to start doing that. And she used this. She basically started a cult where people gave her all their money and all their land and all their property, and they moved into this compound. It's very much like a Waco or a Jonestown or anything like that. So people would just kind of give her everything and move into this compound. Now there's a very scary slide coming up. I just want to warn you. I don't want to. I'm not sure where it is. Oh, these are the two priests she talked into joining her cult. These are two very respected people in her tribe and in her village. Now, let's see if the next slide is... Oh, this is like the region. It's this, basic agricultural area in Uganda, which is this rich farmland. And that is, I think, that's the compound that she set up. It was a big compound. I'm going to say there were about 5,000 people that belonged to this cult. They weren't all in Kanungu, but most of them were in Kanungu. They were in other parts of Uganda as well. So at a certain point, Credonia and the other leaders of this cult realized, I guess kind of like Jim Jones in Jonestown, that things were kind of falling apart and they needed just kind of to get away with all the money that they had. And so she decided what they basically had to do was kind of close up shop by killing everybody, very similar to Jonestown. So let's see. So on one particular week, in the year 2000, they just started killing off all of their followers. And this is a list of various places that the followers got killed off. They were killed off they were being poisoned, they were being shot. In Kanungu, they were all moved into a church, and then the doors were locked, and then everybody got burned up. Let's see. So about 900 people got burned to death. And here's some of the creepy pictures. They were completely burned to death in about 3 or 4 minutes. Everybody was just completely burned to death. And we'll back out of that. Oh, here's another horrible picture. Completely dead, like 900 people, really quickly. And so that's enough of those slides. And to this day, they don't know what happened to Credonia. There's rumors that she escaped to the Congo. There's rumors that she escaped to Malawi. There's rumors that she escaped to the Netherlands. They don't know what happened to her. And then she had her associates, the two priests. They don't know what happened to them either. Nobody really knows. But I'm kind of in agreement, because I talked to the people in Kanungu. There's this idea that she possibly just escaped to the Congo, because the Congo is only like 20 or 30 miles away, and it's the kind of place that you can escape to. So what happened after this? This is in Uganda. Uganda is about 45% Catholic and 45% Anglican, and the other 10% is Muslim or Seventh-day Adventist or something like that. There's not a lot of atheism there, not a lot of humanism. There just isn't. There's hardly any understanding of what it is. But Kanungu, after this horrible atrocity, as you can see, people became a little bit disenchanted with religion, a little disappointed, a little skeptical, maybe afraid. So actually, there is a community in Kanungu that isn't very interested in religion anymore, because their friends and their family and a large part of the village was completely ripped off and killed. And also there's this enormous distrust, and I find this all over Uganda. There's this enormous distrust of religious leaders, because they do have a habit of perhaps professing to have some kind of religious value and knowledge, and then taking your money and then either disappearing or just basically using religion to take advantage of you. So in Kanungu, there is an opening for humanism. It took 900 people to be barbecued for this to happen, but there is an opportunity. So what happened to us was we were operating in another part of Uganda, and this sort of leader from Kanungu approached us and said that he wanted some help from us to set up humanism, to establish humanism as as something for the people in Kanungu. So this is just a little bit of what's going on with humanism in Uganda. There's humanist values that are generally accepted by the humanists of Uganda, and the humanist values are all from a book called Global Ethics, 10 Humanist Principles, which is written by a Canadian. And there's 10 humanist principles here, and only number 6 actually is about religion. Number 6 says no superstition, and it isn't actually the worst religion. The worst religion in Africa by far is not actually Christianity, and it is not even Islam. It is actually traditional African religion, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But briefly, traditional African religion is the only religion in Uganda that says stuff like stuff that we've heard of is stuff like every year Mount Cameroon will blow up unless we kill and sacrifice an albino. That's the kind of stuff that traditional African religion does. Or it will say there are beliefs in traditional African religion like, if you're building a big building, you need to mix the blood of a child into the cement, or the building will fall down. So there's actually still a lot of human sacrifice in traditional African religion. So anyway, so when it says no superstition, it's largely talking about African religion, but it's also, of course, for our purposes, it's talking about all religions. And there's all kinds of other stuff in there, tolerance and stuff. But I would say for us as humanists, the single biggest issue in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, and the one that gets people to join us or gets people to not want to join us has to do with women's equality. Because the traditional religions all place women in an inferior status, and humanism places women as equals, and that is the single biggest issue. Much more important than does God exist or does he not exist. There's this whole question of, are women equal as human beings? And so that's a huge issue. And we've had 2 groups join us by a weird voting phenomenon, like the village of Nyakayumbo joined us by a vote of 43 to 41. All 43 were women, all 41 were men, and so they joined us like that. And the women just say they've had it with all religion. No religion in Africa promotes women as equal to men, and so except humanism, and so they're happy to join us. Okay. So we've added a couple of things. There's the gender equality, and what Brighter Brains Institute does a lot of now is we promote critical thinking, because we decided that was a whole lot easier than just going in there and saying, we don't believe in God, we don't want you to believe in God. What we do is we go in and we say, we want to teach a critical thinking workshop. So we're teaching these critical thinking workshops that were actually designed by a Nigerian named Leo Igwe, who's been an activist, humanist activist for about 10 years. And we've had a really good response on the critical thinking workshops. And the other thing we promote is entrepreneurship. And of course, most important of all, we promote economic sustainability, which means we give them money and help them raise money, because money is more important than God in Africa, and more important than even gender equality. It's just escape from poverty is hugely important. Okay, so what do we got? So this is on the left is the leader of the Kanungu group. His name is Robert Megara, and he went to Kampala on his own before we even knew him, and he met with this guy named Kato Mukasa, who is a member of the IHEU, International Humanist Ethical Union. So he met with him, and he told Kato, our little village wants to become humanist, and what can we do? And I think he's holding the book Global Ethics there. Or no, he's just holding some humanist material. And Kato suggested that he contact us. And so we started our relationship with the village of Kanungu. And this is what Kanungu school looks like. We work through a lot of schools. That's actually a sort of a mid-level kind of quality school in Uganda. There's a lot of schools where the buildings are made out of mud and branches. You know, you just put a bunch of branches cross-hatched, and then you kind of pack mud in. And this is better. This is made out of wood. So that's It's a it's a middle class town, and we always make people make signs right away so that they identify themselves to the community as humanists. And so here's the kids. There's about 200 kids in this school, and the very first thing they ask for, and here's another sign. We want them to, let the community. What? It looks like a cult. No, we just that little thing there is the humanist symbol. And we just want them to let their neighbors know that they're humanists. Okay, so the very first thing they asked for was money, was for food, because the kids are hungry. It's very common in Uganda for kids to eat like one meal a day. And then they can't study, they can't learn anything. So we provide school lunches. So these are the kids. The one meal that they have is this thing called cornmeal. That white thing is like cornmeal, but we provide cornmeal, vegetables, beans, and meat, which is either chicken or goat. And here's some more porridge being put together, and more porridge put together, and that's Robert with the students. And let's see, Robert with the students. Okay, this is the next project we decided to do is we have a consultant who worked in Uganda for 10 years, and so I asked him for advice, and I followed his advice about half the time, which kind of infuriates him. But I'm slowly learning from him what he's learned in 10 years. So what he recommended as an initial project was a community garden, because a community garden gets everybody in the community to work together, and he regards that as really important in creating a sense of community. It's much better than just giving all the money to one person and he starts a business and everybody works for him. So this is a community garden, and they grew tomatoes, and they grew enough tomatoes to provide enough money to continue the lunch program. Okay. So they grew tomatoes and they grew cabbage. Here's some more tomatoes, okay? And then the next thing we did was we started providing workshops on feminism. One of the first things that you have to do in a feminist training class is simply to tell women that they are equal to men, and they should demand equal rights to men, and that they should insist on not being beaten, and they should insist on family planning. They should insist on how many kids they want to have, and that they can also insist on perhaps their husband not going out drinking every night and this sort of thing, because they're competing with these religions that just basically say women is the servant of the man. And so this is our hired employee up here, whose name is Jonalda, and she's teaching the women. And the women are really, there's a problem in Uganda where women go to school for maybe to 5th grade, something like that, and then when they start to get their period, they're just kind of yanked out of school, and that's about it. And so a lot of the women are, they don't have, they may not be literate, they may not have good math skills, and without math skills you can't really be good at business. So the women are just behind in their education. So we're trying to get the women to stick up not only for themselves, but to stick up for their daughters and say, keep your daughters in school, insist that your daughter has every right to be as educated as her brother, that sort of thing. Okay. And so we work with this. We work with the Kanungu Women's Association, of which there's about 40, but this is the leadership of the Kanungu. And we gave them, I think we gave them $1,800 that they split up and distributed to women in the group to do their own individual projects. Okay, and this is, I'm not sure. That's just more women in the women's group. Okay, then we did a fundraiser. Is anybody familiar with this magazine in England called The Freethinker? There's a magazine that comes out of England. It's called The Freethinker, and they've been really wonderful to us, and they actually help us fundraise. So we did a co-fundraiser with them. We do most of our fundraising through GoFundMe. I don't know if you're familiar with that platform, but that's what we do. And so we raised enough money to set up a freethinker library for the kids. And here's some of the books they got. Probably mostly science books. We're not sending them Sam Harris books or anything. These are just science books. Any book. Any books are great because they showed me how many books they had. They said, this is our library. And it was I'm sure there's more. Oh, you have a huge library here. So their library was basically a stack of books about this big for 200 kids. So we're helping them get some. The next project we decided to help them with is a tilapia farm. Not a farm, a tilapia pond. And we decided to do this because tilapia fish, it's a source of protein. And a lot of the Ugandan children, they're protein deficient. So I think we raised about $1,500 for a tilapia pond. And let's see, this is just showing the tilapia pond getting filled up. And there's some fish. And what they're going to do is they're going to sell some of the fish and use that money to keep all the orphans in school. The reality of Uganda is about 13% of all children are orphans. Their parents have died off in many, many possible different ways. The biggest ways are probably malaria and HIV/AIDS. Probably kills most, but they also die off of accidents. There's a huge amount of car accidents, and anything else. We've heard of everything from being killed by hippos to being, murdered, poisonous snakes. A lot of people get killed by poaching because they go into the national parks to hunt for game, and then they're shot to death by a government ranger. So anyway, there's a lot of orphans, 13%, and those kids have no money to go to school. It actually, in Kanungu, there is no public school because it's too small and the government hasn't set up a public school. So there's a private school, which only costs $48 a year to attend, but that's more money than an orphan has. So we provide money for the orphans to go to school. The $48 covers tuition for a year, meaning teacher salaries, and it also provides school books, the uniform, they all have to wear a uniform, supplies, and the lunch program. There's the fish. The tilapia thing has been a huge success. The next thing we did was we raised money for a passion fruit farm. Passion fruit is one of the more profitable crops in Uganda. This is the head of the Kanungu people taking a class in how to actually grow the passion fruit. And some of these pictures are unfortunate because they're all women in the pictures. I don't know what the men are doing, but the women are out there doing the hoeing and the digging. And sometimes there's women and children. Does that look like all women to you? What the heck is going on? Yeah, and so this is... I didn't bring a picture of it, but I actually decided to learn about passion fruit myself. So I planted a passion fruit in my own yard. It's not doing well. So it just really hasn't grown, and the leaves are shriveling up. So, but anyway, they're going to do better than me, we hope. So they're getting ready to plant. Oh, this is, I think they're, I think that's the passion fruit coming up. This is what it's eventually going to look like. It has wires. It's a vine. It crawls around. Passion fruit is regarded as it's got a lot of vitamins, vitamin C and things like this. Okay, the next project we did is soybeans, and we got help from this from a group called the Ontario Humanists, and they have paid for about half of the soybean farm. Let's see what this is. More women out there getting the soybean field ready. And this is what it's eventually going to look like. And the soybeans have multiple uses. They're going to use some of the soybeans to feed the kids because it has a lot of protein. They're going to sell some of the soybeans, and they're also going to feed the soybeans to the tilapia. It'll make the fish grow better and healthier. And that's it. That's all I've got so far. Let me just... before we open up for questions, I'll just tell you what's going on with Kanungu right now. I didn't include it, but what we now make every school go through is a critical thinking workshop. So Kanungu's gone through that, and then we make them go through an entrepreneur workshop, which Kanungu has also gone through. We're trying to teach everybody how to do things that most of you and I know how to do, although I don't do it that well. I just got Brighter Brains just got audited by the IRS, and I had to dig up all this information that I did not carefully file. But we're just trying to teach them, if you're going to run a business, you have to keep careful records. You have to have a plan before you start the business as to how you're going to make money and make sure that your expenses aren't going to be greater than your income, just simple things like that. And then after they take the entrepreneur workshop, they can send us proposals for up to $500 for, questions in just a second. They can send us proposals and we will fund their mini projects. And they have a lot of projects they want to do. And our goal is to get everybody in this village to be humanist, to be in support of women's equality, and to know how to run profitable businesses. Okay, questions, go ahead.
I have a couple of points apropos of nothing. First off, an agricultural setting are seasonal. Mm-hmm. How in the world do these people get by in these agrarian economies when, because they don't have refrigeration, we can import stuff from Mexico, but what do they do? That's one question. My second one is, I notice that they have fabrics for making clothes, plastic buckets and all. Those are all high-tech manufactured stuff. Where does that come from? Is it imported from someplace or what?
Yeah. Okay, so you got two questions. The first question is fun to answer. Uganda is on the equator, and it has ideal climate. It has almost every day it's about 80 degrees, and almost every day it rains. There's a short dry season. But basically, Uganda it's an agricultural paradise. There was a discussion for a while that Uganda could probably feed all of Africa just on Ugandan land. So it has 3 growing seasons and great soil. The Chinese are buying a lot of it. The Chinese are in Uganda and they're buying a lot of Ugandan land. Pardon me?
Volcanic soil.
Yeah. They don't have electricity, no, and they don't have a good irrigation system. They don't actually need the good irrigation because they have so much rainfall. But there's still a lot of anxiety about the population of Uganda was 4 million in 1960, and today it is 40 million. So it's gone up 10 times in the last 58 years. And meanwhile, global warming is taking place. So they've already had some droughts in Kanungu. There's actually people that died of starvation in the last year. So there is a lot of concern about the future. Actually, a huge amount of concern, and it's difficult talking to sub-Saharan Africans about population control. As a white person going in there and saying you really shouldn't have this many kids, it doesn't always go over well. And there's also a certain pride in Africa. There's statistics that indicate that Africa will have more people than the rest of the world combined by the year 2100. That most of the world, most humans, will be African by the year 2100. And that's because the rest of the world is having 1 or 2 kids, and the Africans are still having 4 or 5, 6, lots of kids. So there's a population boom. Uganda is not big. It's the size of Wisconsin, and it's going to have, it has 40 million people already. There's other countries like Nigeria, which isn't that big either. It's probably the size of, I don't know how big it is, Texas or something like that. But it's got close to 200 million people. Or Ethiopia, which has an enormous amount of people. And so there's a lot of concern about that. But in terms of electricity, no, they don't have electricity. What they do a lot of is solar electricity. Your other question was, manufactured items. A lot of their manufactured items they're from China or they're from India, but basically China. And you go over there, the Chinese have built factories. They decided we're just going to build our factories in Uganda. so that we can take the stuff out of our factories and sell it directly to the Ugandans. What's really noticeable is that there's motorcycles everywhere, and there are all these inexpensive Chinese motorcycles. They're basically
Will they make enough cash?
small dirt bikes. Pardon?
They make enough cash to buy this stuff even from China?
Yeah, they get medicine from China. They get, yeah. Actually, one of the things that's kind of costly that we've had to help them with and been kind of disappointed is the cost of tools. Can be kind of expensive. So, but there's nothing we can do because it costs so much to ship stuff over there. So, yeah. Any other questions? Go.
Okay. Hi, my name is Bernice. I just want to preface by saying I'm a first generation Nigerian. My parents are from Nigeria. So your organization and your mission is like really dear to my heart. So I'm going to pick your brain about that a little bit more.
I would love to talk about Nigeria, and I'm going to. But yeah. But do you have a question?
Yeah. So how is the village of Kanungu perceived by the surrounding villages? And do you have any plans to spread past Kanungu, or have you guys already done that?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that question, and then I'll talk about Nigeria, because that's really fun. Kanunga is, it's not our only project. It's our 15th or 20th project. We did a bunch of projects in this, there's a city called Kasese, which is the third largest city in Uganda, and we did all these projects in villages around Kasese. And we didn't actually want to get involved in Kanunga at first because it's not in that area. And so, like the last time I went to Uganda, we went to all of our places around Kasese, and then the guy from Kanunga met us there, and he goes, "Will you come to my village?" And I said, "I just can't. It's too far away. It's too far away." But the next time I go, I'm going to go to Kanunga because it's actually near the gorilla park. So that's going to be fun, and it's near a really beautiful region. So Kanunga has had a better reception to humanism than any other village we've worked in, and it's partly because of the massacre. I think it's probably mostly because of the massacre. There just isn't that as much resistance. I think people are just open to like new ideas. And I'm going to talk about Nigeria now, okay, just a little bit, because Nigeria is one of our newest projects. What part of Nigeria are you from?
Southeast.
So you're Igbos. Yes, you know Leo Igwe is an Igbo. Yeah. Yes. So we're not actually working in Igbo land because we work in the north, which is the Muslim part. We work in the kind of the Boko Haram area, which is really, really exciting. So we basically work with, it's not like I'm there, dodging bullets or anything, but I get to live vicariously through the people that we work with. We mainly work in Maiduguri, which is totally Boko Haram territory. And then there's these other cities called Zaria and Kaduna. And we're teaching critical thinking workshops there. And I just got a real exciting email like 2 days ago that I was going to actually read to you. But it's kind of brave. I got this guy going into... We're basically... Our partners are basically ex-Muslims. They're ex-Muslims. One of them is kind of famous. His name is Mubarak Bala. It's difficult to be an ex-Muslim. So he decided he was an ex-Muslim, and his family promptly made him go to a psychiatrist, and he remained an ex-Muslim. So his family put him in an insane asylum, and they stuck him in there. And he thought he was stuck, but then he managed to get a cell phone, and he texted some atheist blogger in Canada, and she started a whole campaign, and she got Mubarak Bala out. And so Mubarak Bala got out, and he's like this atheist blogger in Nigeria who gets death threats all the time. And he's on our board of directors, and he's on Facebook all the time, and he's driving everybody crazy that the Muslims hate him. So he works for us, and then this other guy who's an ex-Muslim works for us. But they're very brave guys. This one guy, the email I got, he went into a high school, and he just said, he goes, "Well, I'm teaching critical thinking, and I want you to critically think about something." He goes, "I want you to think about, is there a heaven or hell?" And they all said, of course there's a heaven, and of course there's a hell. How can you even ask that question? And he goes, but how do you know that? And one of the kids said, Muhammad and Allah said that we're not supposed to ask those kind of questions, like that. And he said, I don't want to talk about Islamic doctrine. That's not why I'm here. I'm just saying, you know, I'm here to promote critical thinking. And the whole class got totally into it, and some other teachers came in, and everybody got totally into this notion of critical thinking. Meaning, we take critical thinking for granted. But what I mean when I talk about critical thinking is looking for evidence to support your belief system, right? So he's like, well, why do you believe in heaven and hell? Do you have any evidence that heaven exists or that hell exists? And he said the students, these are all Muslim students, they got totally interested in the topic, and the teachers got interested in the topic, and so he's invited back as a regular teacher there. And the other thing we're doing in that region is there's a lot of refugee camps set up for people that have been displaced by Boko Haram. So we're sending just aid into that. And the other thing that I think is really interesting, there's a group of kids. It's not that well known. It's this human rights atrocity, which is poor Muslim families take their sons and they give them to Islamic centers, and they give them to mosques. And these kids are raised in mosques and Islamic centers, and they're raised in the worst possible conditions. They're just basically all shoved into a room. They're only educated in the Quran. All they learn how to do is to recite the Quran. They're not even fed. They're told to go in the street and beg for food. Now, an interesting statistic is, we're all familiar with Boko Haram, right? What Boko Haram is. An interesting statistic is that 80% of Boko Haram are kids from these Islamic centers. The group is called, I think, it's called the Almira system or something. It's that system where they're forced into these Islamic centers. Anyway, so we're trying to help those kids, and we're trying to help those kids. We're teaching them crafts. So when they go into the street to beg, we give them food, and then we teach them a skill. And the main skill we're teaching them right now is how to make soap. And that's got value because then they have soap too, which otherwise they would never have. So we're giving out blankets and food and clothes, and we're trying to help these Almajiri, that's what they're called. Okay, so Nigeria is a fascinating place to work. I regard it as Algeria, you know, northern Nigeria is Muslim and southern Nigeria is Christian, and then there's just like a lot of murder and violence taking place at that intersection, and it's just a really interesting country to work in. Okay, any other questions? Go ahead. Yeah.
When you were talking about the Kanungu, I guess, and the school there, you said they had a very small stack of books.
Yeah.
Is there something that an organization like us, this is not really very large, but things that we could donate or help in some way that...
Yeah, what I could do is, I'm a little bit lax in knowing all about the books. I've had other people in the organization get books. There's a group out of England called Scholastic Books, and they send books. And there's another group, I think out of Australia, or maybe it's England, it's called Bookwitty, and they send books. It's very expensive just to wrap your book up and send it there. Although I have a woman in Canada, and she sends books over all the time. Yeah. And you can send children's books. We have to be kind of careful sometimes. I've had people send children's books. You know, some book like are you familiar with Thomas the Train? This is not a good book, you know. Like people go, Thomas the Train, what a good book to send. It's got a bunch of white kids and a train. These kids have never seen a train, and they've never seen white kids. It's just not the right book to send. So in some ways it's good to, send money and tell them to get Ugandan books that have like Ugandan kids doing Ugandan things. Those kind of books make more sense. But I will send. I'll send Arthur some information on how to send them books.
Yeah.
What kind of books, like English books, or what kind of books, like English books, or if money is better, or whatever? It'd be. Yeah. There might be some things we could do.
I don't know. We sort of send a lot of science books. We send a lot of books on science. I guess that's a good thing to do. Books about other parts of the world. A lot of these kids they've never been out of their village, and so the notion that there is a whole world is like a book that informs them about geography. Also, books about just the whole cosmos are interesting. That there's planets and suns and galaxies. Those kinds of books are really fascinating. We've sent them telescopes, things like that. Okay, other questions? You've got a question, yeah.
I noticed that all of your signs are in English. How did they acquire their English, and what's the average scholastic level that you would target books to?
Yeah, no, English is an official language in Uganda. Uganda actually has 60 different tribes and 60 different languages. And so the only way you can have a unified country is to have, like English. Almost every Ugandan speaks more than one language. They speak the language of their tribe, and then they speak this other language called Hanga, which is the major tribe of Uganda. But I think it's only like 19% of Uganda is the Hanga tribe, so they learn that. And then a lot of people learn Swahili, which is sort of a general language. But then at school, they learn English. But their English isn't that good, and it's kind of comical. It's kind of entertaining. Their English is kind of, because it's British, so the English is kind of formal, and they have a habit of knowing like these very formal British words, but with terrible grammar. So that's kind of entertaining. The average school level is probably grade 5 or 6, something. But that's a Ugandan grade 5 or 6. That means you've learned in a classroom with sitting in the dirt with 40 other children who are hungry, all trying to listen to a mediocre teacher who is only there maybe 60% of the time. Other days she just doesn't get there. Okay.
Arthur Jackson here.
Yes, hi.
One thing you said that really impresses me is that you do things to help these children learn about starting their own business. Mm-hmm. That wasn't your words, but that's what I take out of it.
Yeah.
And to my mind, that is such a critical thing. My son, who recently got out of prison, and of course one of the most difficult things after you get out of prison is how do you get a job and support yourself, because nobody wants to hire you. Mm-hmm. And he worked with a group in prison called Defy, which means we defy the odds that 87 or 67% of people who get out of prison are going to go back, because there's no support once they get out. And it seems to me that that's such a critical thing, because to figure out how to not only support yourself, but in the process support other people is just a critical kind of thing. Yeah.
That's a complicated thing. There's so much to say about that question. A sad fact is that I've heard that the single biggest economy in Uganda is American nonprofits. Meaning like me. And what that means is that some people decide, and we've had enormous problems with corruption, with just people taking your money and not doing the projects. And what that means is that some people decide the best way to make money is to swindle white people and swindle nonprofits. And so they're all over Facebook, and everybody knows the Nigerian scam kind of thing. But that's like a huge so we don't want them doing that, right? So we want them to learn how to, operate a business and be successful at it. It's challenging. I actually took on. I actually decided, since I'm giving out $500 grants to people, and they're expected to turn that $500 into a sustainable amount of money. I've actually forced myself to do 2 projects myself, and so far I am failing. I set up a little business where I'm going to become a advisor in succulent gardening, and I haven't gotten any calls. So and the other one is even worse. The other one is apparently there's money to be made in worm poop. you know? So you can have a worm farm and people buy like the worm poop. It's great for their houseplants. Again, no profit yet, Arthur. So I think it is difficult. But I think it's extremely important, and especially working with the women's groups. The women's groups, there'll be like 20 women, and they decide things, you know, together, and they're very cautious, and they're very extremely motivated. So I'm hoping for some success, and so far we've had a lot of success. We started off offering project funds of $3,000. So we offered a lot of $3,000 projects, and our success rate was about 30%. So that's not good. We were either getting, the projects were either failing, or they were simply, the money was disappearing, was being stolen. And so my consultant, who worked there 10 years, he said, what you're doing is wrong. You can't offer $3,000, it's too much money. You need to just offer $500. So now we're offering $500, and so far our rate has been 100%. It's 100%. Every project is working at that amount of money. So I hope did I answer your questions? Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, can you comment on like Africa was not Christian continent. It had its own tribal values, rituals, and religions. How did the Christianity expand? What are the fundamental reasons behind Christianity to expand in Africa? Can you comment on that? And then I have a second question.
Yeah, I can try. It's not something I know that much about. I know that there was what is called the rush for Africa, which is the colonialism, the imperialism that seemed to take place mostly from about 1840 to 1910. And so Africa was completely divided between the French and the English and the Portuguese and a little bit of Spanish, and that's about it, you know. And so all of those missionaries from those countries went into Africa, and they're still like, I think there might be more Episcopalians or more Anglicans now in Africa than there are in England, you know. So that's how it went in. It's kind of an interesting debate. I had one of our people wrote an essay called "Islam and Christianity Must Go: Bring Back African Religions." And he wrote this, and Leo Igwe wrote in this essay that I believe, it just said, that's not the answer. He goes, of course Islam and Christianity must go, but bringing back African religion is not the answer. It's worse than either Christianity or Islam. That was his opinion. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, the second question is related to what is the goal? Because you can just go to a country and challenge the culture and the cultural values and say that, the God doesn't exist, because it doesn't solve anything, to be very honest.
Right.
What are the issues that you're trying to resolve by being an integral part of that culture, rather than an outsider and a white American or white Canadian going there and saying, this is the best for you? How do you know?
Yeah.
How do you integrate into the cultural paradigm of those countries and be an integral part and grow from within rather than from outside?
Right. Yeah, that's a complicated question in which we occasionally get criticized as, what right do I have, as a white man have going into Africa and telling these people how to live their lives, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And sometimes I do feel sorry for Africans. I mean, good grief. They're colonized by Europeans, and then the Europeans go in there and they say, we want you all to be Christians. And then I show up and I say, forget it. I'm another white guy. Forget Christianity. We want you all to be humanists. So I understand, and I feel sorry. This is like so confusing. But in terms of something you said earlier, I don't see... I feel successful by like little things. Like if we can go into a village like we have and say, we want you to, like we offer these critical thinking workshops. We pay them $100 to all get together and talk about superstitious beliefs and what they collectively think about them. So when we do that, and they talk about things like, is child sacrifice, does it work? Does child sacrifice work? And they collectively get together and they decide, child sacrifice doesn't work. And this isn't an abstraction. Like, we had a kid at one of our orphanages was abducted. He was taken out of the orphanage, and he was dragged into the jungle, and they cut off his testicles and killed him. So that's an actual person who was killed by traditional African religion, at one of our orphanages. So that's not an abstraction to me. So to actually promote the idea that this isn't only morally wrong, but it's completely ineffective. Nobody at any of these critical workshops is saying stuff like, I gave a goat to the witch doctor and it rained the next day. They're all getting together and talking and saying, have you ever had any success with the witch doctors? And everybody's going, no, I haven't. So one of our stipulations before anybody gets any project money is no money goes to witch doctors, no money goes to priests, no money goes to ministers. And we also another stipulation is nobody's allowed to pray for money. We're trying to get people to use their time and money effectively, because it's not any good for us to send somebody $1,000 and find that they gave it all to witch doctors and priests. And there's an enormous amount of, I'm probably going off topic, but I'm going to tell you anyway. There's an enormous amount of superstition that's completely destructive. Like, this village named Hanga informed us that the kids don't get good grades because half the kids think that the way to get good grades is either by praying for good grades, or you do things like you take the pen that you're going to take the test with and you leave it in a church overnight, right? And that pen's going to help you. The pen's going to know the answer. So we actually spent a year just promoting humanism, and it was not very effective because I think it was too big of a jump and it was too aggressive in some kind of way. And now we're promoting critical thinking, where we're just trying to get people to think logically, and to think I want to proceed and with my life and do things that make sense. That I'm going to believe in stuff that there's evidence that it works. Okay. So in terms of your other question, I think it's complicated. For me as a white guy to go in there, a thing we're doing in Ghana right now is we're opposed to female genital mutilation. So somebody can say that this is not an issue for a man to get involved with or an outsider to get involved with. But I personally, when you look at what we did in the workshop, the critical thinking workshop on female genital mutilation, is we asked, why do you do it? Critically, why do you do it? And the reasons are ridiculous. I don't know all the reasons. I'd have to open up my laptop. But the reasons are just so ridiculous. They think that if they don't do the female genital mutilation, there's all kinds of diseases that come out of the parts of the body that they didn't cut out, and that the men are going to get sick, and there's all kinds of completely misinformed kinds of information. So I just don't think that culturally, female genital mutilation scientifically it doesn't have any value, and I'm happy. And I don't have to tell them that. I simply have to get them all together to discuss it. And I think that they'll figure it out for themselves by critically examining it. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Hi, so my question is about the picture that you showed us in terms of educating the women on their rights and making decisions independent from their husbands.
Yeah.
My question is, are the men, what are the men's roles in the city, and are there also seminars or workshops created to educate men too on how to properly treat women? Because I see that a lot of pictures have women as the workers in the fields.
Yeah.
But what are the men? Because I think men are also part of the problem too. So what do you guys do to educate the men as well?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of odd. We work 80%. Right now, we work 80% with women's organizations, women's collectives. But there are men in the women's collectives for whatever reason. Men have decided that they want to be part of these collectives. There's no such thing as a men's collective. I haven't found one in Africa, and this is a generalization, but I'm going to say it anyway. There's a notion that we have struggled with, which is a lot of men want to be the big man in the village, the big man. And so if I show up as a guy with money and say, do you want to do this, do you want to do that, do you want to do that, and I'm going to send you money, you're going to do this, that person who wants to be the big man might skim 10%, 20%, 30%, 50% off the top to help himself become the big man. And even if he doesn't do it right away, eventually, like last time I went over there, this guy who I helped set up 4 schools, he's just like, I didn't think he had any money, and I get there and he's like, which car do you want me to drive? And he's got 2 cars better than my car, He's got 2 Toyotas, a sedan, and he's got one of these big vans, and I'm just like, that's not good, that's our money. So, and the women, for whatever reason, women in Africa work collectively. They seem to work collectively. I don't know whether it's the fact that they've been marginalized so long and they're now dependent on each other, or that they're more sensitive about maintaining their bonds and their friendships, that they're not willing to betray the rest of the group to get ahead. They don't seem to have that. So I feel like if we help the women, a women's group, the whole women's group will benefit. Whereas I've had enormous disappointment by helping one man who I trust to be the leader in the village, and then finding out that, oh no, I've just helped him elevate his own particular status. But there's also like polygamy is quite common in Uganda still. So I helped this one guy, and the next time I went, he had his 3rd wife. I helped him get a 3rd wife. That's not really our goal. Okay. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah. So
yes.
Holly Rising.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, Uganda is also home to quite a number of refugees out of South Sudan, out of the Central African Republic, and out of the Congo. Mm-hmm. Are any of your efforts at creating schools and creating livelihoods involved with any of those populations?
Yeah, we're not in northern Uganda, which is where the Sudanese are coming in, mm-hmm. but we're on the Congo border, and which is an interesting phenomenon. I forgot to tell you that another main reason that there's so many orphans in western Uganda is because their parents have been killed by I think there's some number like 14 or 15 militias in the eastern Congo. And these militias are basically warlord gangs, and a lot of them control like mining activities, and that's where they get their income. Like they've gone and taken over a mine, and that's their money. And so they occasionally go into Uganda and rape and kill, and then leave, like that. It's a fascinating part of the world. We had a problem last year because we worked with this tribe called the Bakanzo, and the Bakanzo, this actually becomes relevant. The Bakanzo are a tribe. There's 1 million Bakanzo in Uganda and 5 million Bakanzo in the Congo. And so the Bakanzo decided they wanted to be a separate country. This was only in a couple of UK newspapers. So the Bakanzo launched a secessionist movement. And people in my schools were totally involved because they're all Bakanzo. And it lost. It lost, of course, and they were all killed. The Bakanzo tribe is completely tribal. They have a king, and when we hike up into the foothills and we visit these little villages, and they'll bring out the Bakanzo flag, and they'll say, "Welcome to Ruwenzuru, the Bakanzo kingdom," like that they're not part of Uganda. But the reason it fits in with our discussion is I made one of these Bakanzo villages do the critical thinking workshop, and they sent me a report, and they said, we talked about the recent rebellion in our critical thinking workshop, and we decided the reason they thought they were going to win was because their witch doctors, their medicine men, said they had a spell that would make them bulletproof. Seriously. This is 2018. They thought they had a spell that would make them bulletproof. So, like I said, the whole rebellion lasted like a half an hour. All these kids marched towards the Ugandan army and were shot down. So, but I made them do the critical thinking workshop, and they said, we decided that the spell that made us bulletproof, the spell only lasts for 30 minutes. And I said, please, I want you to consider the fact that the spell might not work at all. I had to say that, right? So, I don't know if I answered your question, but I just remembered that. And that's something, we got like 3 reports from that because they're still befuddled that this magic didn't work. And it was actually a huge boost to humanism because they were just like, oh, this traditional African medicine actually doesn't work. Maybe the humanists are right. Maybe superstition doesn't work. Okay, question. Go ahead.
I have an observation about when we talk about missions in Africa, we're not talking about something that's really removed from influences on our own country. And I think the observation I would make is that over the years, the persons who have volunteered to be missionaries have been much more from the conservative or orthodox aspects of whichever religion they represent. And now you commented there were more Episcopalians, Anglicans in Africa than in England. And that has an effect on the world church when it's a connected church. That's true in the Methodist Church, which has had a strong missionary component. And now in this country, the Methodist Church is really at risk of splitting over views about homosexuality.
Yeah.
And much of that has been because the world organizations of Methodism are getting the feedback, the pushback from mission, what words considered just mission churches, because they get to vote. And there was already enough bias in this country to build on, or to be overcome, that the church itself is very likely to split. I think it won't be very long.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't even talked about the homophobia in Uganda. It's a tremendously homophobic country, but it's not traditionally homophobic. There's a lot of Protestant ministers and some Catholics, but it's amazing Protestant ministers go in there and preach homophobia, and in really cruel and ugly kind of ways that maybe I'll tell later at a dinner table and are really shocking. Yeah. They show. I'll tell you now, just for fun. There's a film you could watch. It's called God Loves Uganda, and it's about this phenomenon of Protestant ministers going in there, and what they do is they rent like a big hall and they invite people in, and then they actually they totally equate homosexuality with pedophilia. So I can't even go in there and say we support homosexuality because all they hear is pedophilia. That's completely one word, right? I can't go in there and say I support pedophilia. So I can't even say homosexuality without them getting like completely muddled, because the Protestants who are homophobic have merged the two. But what's kind of amusing is the way they got them opposed to homosexuality was they would go and they'd show like gay porno films to these big halls of Ugandans. It's quite an amusing film. So these poor Ugandans just think they're going to hear about Jesus, and all of a sudden they're watching like really explicit gay pornography, and and then they run out of the building and they look for gays to persecute. Anyway, other questions? Yes, go ahead. I think my time's almost up. Okay.
Well, we've traveled we've been in East Africa a bit, West Africa, Nepal, a little bit in Tibet, and in the UK, and wherever we've gone, the dollar is very valuable. Mm-hmm. Very valuable above their own money. Also, wherever we've gone, there's always somebody who can speak some English. And has that been... Did you find that current in your part of Africa? Certainly you talk about the dollar.
Yeah. Usually in Uganda, they'll take $1, but when you get into the remote little villages, they don't actually know what the heck that is. So that doesn't always work. And what you said is true. There's always somebody that speaks English wherever you go. It's confusing because wherever you go, you want to work with whoever speaks the English the best. But that isn't always the person who is ethically the best person to work with. So we've had some troubles. You know, we go in and we work with the guy who speaks English the best because he's got internet and we can communicate with him, and then he'll turn out to be like, well, that's his criminal plan, you know, is to learn English. So that can be difficult. Yeah.
All right. Well,
Okay.
thank you very much for a fascinating talk.